What are some of the biggest mistakes I've made as a boss? Hi, I'm Brett, the Audi Boss, and on this channel we talk about ADHD and autism in the workplace. I'm Brett, I'm an autistic boss with ADHD, and I have over 10 years of leadership experience and training. One of my special interests is leadership training and leadership experience. I love to learn a lot about being a leader. I like to grow as a leader, and I like to refine what I know and what I do. I like feedback as a leader. So I thought what I would do today is step back and reflect on some of my leadership practices. A lot of these things I learned before I realized I had autism and ADHD. And now having that fresh perspective with a late diagnosis has sort of changed my thinking about being a leader and how I sort of think about these things differently. Not leading with curiosity. Now, this was a leadership technique I had to grow into. When I first started off as a manager, the first mistake most managers make, and I certainly have made this mistake myself, was you're so busy doing the job you were doing before. In a lot of cases, especially in the corporate world, once you become that first-time manager and you're still really working on the day-to-day stuff and trying to be a manager at the same time. So one of the hardest parts about doing that transition was sort of realizing and accepting and stepping into the identity of being a manager. And certainly that was hard for me. And now on this side of knowing about my autism and ADHD diagnosis, having that self-awareness of I have to act differently, I have to carry myself differently, I have to think differently, I have to approach people differently now that I'm a manager and I have that title. It really sort of took me a while to sort of step into that mindset. And one of the things that it took me a while to learn, and thankfully I had a really great mentor, was leading more with curiosity instead of having that first initial emotional reaction. Now, we talk a lot about this with autism and ADHD. We might have that knee-jerk reaction where we're sort of emotionally or stressfully or fight or flight or any of those things that kind of come up for us. We might have that initial knee-jerk reaction. Especially with ADHD, especially with autism, they will cause us to have different reactions. One of the things I had to learn was instead of reacting right away to the thing that I was listening to, was to sort of pause, process, certainly let things in, process some of the information that I'm getting, and have follow-up questions. But not just follow-up questions. They're like, why did you do that? Or what were you thinking? Or do you know how stupid that was? No, instead you want follow-up questions that are more along the lines of, can you help explain to me what happened in this situation? What other context is that I might be missing here? Can you tell me more about your thinking process that led to this situation or whatever it is? The more you can kind of lead with curiosity questions and withhold judgments until you get the full story, the better off it'll be. And I always have this one story that I always go to. I had a different manager in a different department call me up one day and complain really hard about something that someone on my team had done. They were in a situation with a customer and this other manager watched my employee do something that they were not happy with how they reacted to it in that moment, in that situation. And, you know, I trusted this manager. This is someone that I've known for a really long time. I've worked with very closely. But my responsibility was to the person that reported into me. So I needed to get the full context of the story. I needed to get their perspective before I weighed judgment on what happened in this situation, how we were going to handle it, as opposed to just calling that person up and saying, hey, you know, so-and-so just called and screamed at me about something stupid that you did. Instead, I approached that person with, hey, can you tell me a little bit about how that thing went today? And then I waited and I listened. And then eventually they got to their perspective on that story. And I stopped them when they started to say, hey, just so you know, so-and-so did call me about this, but I would love to hear more about what happened from your perspective. They then proceeded to tell me more context around their perspective of the thing that happened, which this other manager had no information about, had no idea about these other things, and was completely unaware of these other precedents that had happened inside this conversation. I was able to sit with my employee and we were able to come up with a plan about how to figure out how to respond and how to thoughtfully respond and where I would step in versus where they would step in and where we needed to cover everything. Ended up having a pretty peaceful resolution to the whole thing because I took time to stop and listen to the person on my team who I trusted quite a bit, or else they wouldn't have been in that role in the first place. And the more I lead with curiosity and I pause and I ask questions and I lean into learning, the better I'm able to respond as a manager, which leads me to my next lesson. Responding too quickly or responding in the emotions. A lot of times things will come up. You might get a question to gets asked of you that can trigger your rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or you can get a question that sounds overly critical of a decision that you made, or a critical decision of management that you don't always have the answer for, or any question or comment that might come up. It could even be a question about something that has nothing to do with you, nothing in your department, but you're responsible to answer that because you're the manager in that situation or you're someone's boss. I have found I don't always need to have an answer in the moment. And when I was younger, ADHD would sort of drive that. ADHD would always feel like I have to be the expert in the room. I have to always have a response. I have to answer right away. I have to talk my way out of this. But as I've grown a little older, as I've matured, both in my emotional intelligence, as some of my ADHD has cooled the older that I get, and, you know, certain things have sort of leveled out and autism takes a little bit more over. And as I've gotten more training as a leader, the more I've realized, okay, stop, take a breath, sit with that question, and a couple of ways to respond to things like that. One, it's okay to say, you know what, I don't specifically know what the right answer to that question is, but I'm going to go look into that and I'm going to get back to you. But here's what I do know, and here's the information I do have, and here's what I know at this moment, and here's how I can respond at this time with, and then give the best answer I possibly can in the moment with the information that I have. Now, that may mean you may go get contradictory information and come back with something that is the complete opposite or contradicts what I just said. But the important thing is not responding defensively, not responding in anger, not responding in a way that sort of makes a situation more tense, or tense if it wasn't to begin with. Maybe they're asking, you know, with no negative intent behind their question. But if I then respond really negatively, suddenly I've made the situation tense, or I've made the situation awkward. I've done this plenty of times over my career, and I've often had to walk that back. But the times that I stop and I pause and I reflect and I think about it, or I can ask more follow-up questions, which is my other favorite thing to do, is ask more questions to get more of an understanding of where this person's coming from, where is their information coming from, especially in the corporate world. There's a lot of times there's going to be rumors flying around. This connects to one of the other things, being careful to not let my anxiety take over team priorities or team conversations or conversations. You know, if I'm getting anxious about something because maybe there's something confidential that I'm learning about on the executive side or the leadership side, I can't then bring that anxiety of knowing that thing into my team until it's an appropriate time to say something. I also just can't take the anxiety of some other to-do list item and just disrupt everything else in their priorities or disrupt other things that they're doing. Now, I've done this plenty of times in the early parts of my management career, and I've had some thoughtful colleagues call me out on that, and I've had to sort of sit with that and address, oh, that's my anxiety. I need to recognize in myself, that's my anxiety that's been driving that thing. I need to be careful about that. Now, again, for me, it could be rumination. It could be ADHD and autism anxiety that's driving some of that. A lot of it could be OCD anxiety that's driving some of that. So I need to sort of process that and figure out who I have a safe person to talk to about those things, and then figure out the best approach to how to work with my team on those things so that we are sticking to the priorities that we need to have. Now, I can go to them and say, hey, team, look, you know, some of our priorities have changed. We've got something happening over here. What information can I provide my team? If I'm going to change their priorities or I'm going to disrupt their workflow, can I give them information about why? It's important to always let my team know why we're making the decision that we're making, why we're changing priorities, why we're doing this versus that, and then talk through how we can come back to that other thing so that we can reprioritize it later if we need to. Shifting priorities is a very common thing in the workplace, and it's a part of how we talk through those changes and those priorities with the team so that everybody feels like they're a part of that process and not feeling just dictated to. It's also critical that I be aware of where my anxiety comes up and not let my anxiety drive those things without making it clear or making sure that there is an actual business need or business change that helps drive that. Similar to that, letting my ADHD take over. This is something I've been reflecting on a lot over the last couple of years since getting my late diagnosis. My ADHD was definitely more in the driver's seat when I was younger. Certainly in my 20s and my early 30s, my ADHD was the primary primary driver of all of my decisions. Anytime something new or exciting or something thrilling would come up, my ADHD would kick in and I would tell my team, we've got to start doing this thing. We've got this new idea. We've got that new idea. We've got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. And it would lead to just exhausting my team. It would frustrate people. They would get upset. Why are we stopping this? Why are we doing that? All because you've had a new idea or you've, created something that you want to do. And that's definitely not good management on my part. And definitely, one of the problems that I have is that my ADHD it's a blessing and a curse, because on the blessing side, it's allowed me to be an idea machine. I can sit down with pretty much any topic and just generate tons and tons and tons of ideas in any given moment. Now, the downside to that is the ADHD makes me chase the excitement and the dopamine of those new ideas, but that can be really disruptive to the rest of my team and their projects and the work that they want to do. So when I have those ideas come in, it's okay to document them. It's okay to note them. It's okay to catch those ideas, but then talk over with my team some of the brainstorming, have brainstorming calls, have idea calls, have moments where we can talk through exciting things or share with them things that I'm thinking about, and then put it to them to figure out, hey, is this something that we could try at some point when you guys have some bandwidth, or when there's an opening on the schedule, or when there's something like this or like that? Let's try to do something like this. If there's a way we can kind of catch a priority and divert it to that new idea, certainly we talk through that process and I let their feedback sort of help drive where we go from there. If I'm really insistent that that's a thing we have to do because I know it's going to help us, we'll do that. We'll talk that over. But if the team thinks that I'm making a huge mistake over that, I kind of want to know that too. I kind of need them to hold me accountable in that way and sort of say, that may not work the way you want it to work. So it's definitely important to not let the excitement that can sometimes come up with my ADHD take over, much like I was talking about with anxiety taking over. But it's a balancing act, but it's also having the emotional awareness to be aware that I'm doing it in the moment, gut checking myself to go, okay, how do I do this in a way that it's not disruptive to everybody's projects and the workflow and the tasks we have to get done? And that's also where it's really important to have other managers on my team that I can talk those ideas over with. And I also have to create the space for those managers to tell me that I'm wrong, if I am wrong, and if it's a bad idea. But again, it's about how we deliver that feedback and how we model that feedback and how we model giving that feedback so that I'm also not being thoughtless in my words. I want to make sure that I'm being thoughtful about anybody else's rejection sensitivity so that I'm not triggering that in somebody else. And I have to be really careful with the word choices that I use so that I'm thoughtful in my feedback, productive in my feedback. The feedback continues growth, continues dialogue, and we move forward in that, but we're not making that feedback feel hurtful or disruptive or, frankly, misunderstood, which is another big part. Which leads me to my next one, speaking when I should be listening. Now, obviously, I sit here, I talk about ADHD and autism as a special interest. The work that I do is a special interest, which is why I have that job, which is why I do that job. It's my special interest. I love that work. I love doing that work. I'm a specialist in that field. I'm a strategist in that field. And so I get excited about those things. And when people want to talk about those things, I get really excited about those topics. But I also have to grow the people around me. I have to grow people's skills, people's talent. And if I always rush in to be the first person to speak in a meeting or in a situation or in a call, then I'm not allowing space for people to grow and to learn and to be trained around me. I need to model, not always feeling like I need to speak or not always feel like I have to be the first one with the answer. And that's the other key thing about being a manager in a lot of these calls. If I answer first, the rest of the team may not respond. The rest of the team may not share their ideas. The rest of the team may not react in the way that can help a healthy debate exist or a healthy creative moment exist. So a lot of times I will hold back my commentary and speak last or speak later on so that the room has a chance to discuss and a lot of ideas can be generated and brainstorming can occur. And that might help change my mind. I might come in with one perspective and then hear everybody around the room talk about something, and then it might change my mind. It might give me time to process. It might give me time to think through a lot of things. I don't need to always be the person speaking, not giving myself enough time to process. I don't necessarily always need to answer in the moment, unless it's an emergency or unless there's something incredibly urgent. If I'm sort of getting feelings or something's coming up for me, it's okay for me to step away. It's okay for me to go to reflect. It's okay for me to even say, you know what, I need some time to think about that. Let me come back to that in this amount of time or that amount of time. A lot of times if an email comes in that really, fires me up or something like that or gets me all excited, I have a 8 to 12 hour not going to respond policy. If I'm feeling some strong emotions come up or some defensiveness or some frustration or something come up for an email like that, I'm going to wait a little bit before I respond so that I can kind of calm down, think a little bit more, get my thoughts together before I respond. Again, if it's not urgent, if it's not an emergency, I'm going to buy myself time and respond later. That's a really key thing, is to making sure that I give myself time to process. Rigid rules or rigid thinking. This is a big one. This was a big one for me. This actually came up a few years ago during a leadership training. And again, this was before I realized I had autism and ADHD. On this side of it, I can now recognize where I have rigid rule thinking. Prior to a few years ago, before my diagnosis, I had a lot harder time doing this. Another manager said to me, well, when I train somebody to do something, I've put that person in that role to do that thing. They may not always do it the way I did it, and I need to be okay with that. And it occurred to me in that moment, oh my God, I'm not always okay with that. I'm always trying to get somebody to do it exactly the way I want it done, or exactly the way I would do it. That's a part of my rigid rules and my rigid thinking. But once that job is that person's got to find their own way. They've got to find their own way, because if it were me, I would want to find my own way. Because of my autism and ADHD, I would be furious if someone was micromanaging me and trying to make me always do things the way that they wanted me to do it. I wouldn't be happy in that job and I would leave. So instead, I need to give enough space. So there's a teaching rule called the gradual release of responsibility. This is a really key technique in letting someone learn a thing gradually, give them tools, give them tips, give them responsibilities, allow them to take little by little by little by little until they have the whole thing in ownership, and then let them go. And the more you let them go, they can grow, follow up, ask them questions, ask them what kind of support they need. Be clear in the directions you give, be clear in the instructions that you give. Make sure that they have space to come back and ask all the questions that they want. Put a few safeguards in here or there to just sort of make sure, just in case this, just in case that. But you've got to create the space for them to learn it on their own with a safety net. We don't abandon them. We just make sure that we're there to support them as they do it. And then it's theirs. And then I have to mentally release that thing and not stress about it, not worry about it, know that it's not mine anymore and that it's theirs to worry about and it's their responsibility. And then be okay with that. I'm constantly questioning myself, why do we always do it that way? Why have we always done it that way? Why do I always have to do it that way? And that's really helped me sort of relax a lot of rigid rules and rigid thinking that I have. And I try to encourage my team to gently call me out on my rigid rule thinking. Sometimes there are certain things that just have to be done certain ways. There's policies, there's procedures, there's laws, obviously. But there are things that are just rules that I created because that's just me, and I have to have some flexibility to let people do things and find their own way. That allows us the freedom of not having to do everything. There are so many managers that come to me or that I work with every day that feel overwhelmed and overburdened because they feel like they have to do everything. I was one of those managers. I was definitely one of those people who felt like I had to do everything. It was because I wasn't giving enough of delegation. I wasn't teaching enough. I wasn't giving enough time to show somebody how to do something. Yes, it will always be faster if you do it yourself, but that also means that person's never going to learn. It also means you're never going to be free to do other things you want to do because you're always going to be stuck doing that thing. And they may get it wrong, and that's okay. And you can help them when they do, and you can make that a teachable moment by gently helping and not shaming or finger pointing or anything like that. For myself, was allowing people to take stuff over, even if they don't do it exactly the way I would do it. But they might do it even better. And many people have. Lots of people that I've trained over the years have taken things on and done things amazingly better, far better than I ever could do it myself, and has made things so much better. So those are just some of the things that I have learned over the years being an Audi boss, being a boss in training with autism and ADHD, things that I've reflected on since learning about my autism and ADHD. I'm curious about you. I'm curious about what are your rules? What are your management techniques and styles or thinking, or what is something that a manager has taught you over the years? Has a mentor taught you something? Have you learned on these things? Are there things you wish a manager would know, in particular around ADHD and autism? Let me know in the comments below. And also, if you have a topic or an idea for a video that you would like for me to touch on, you can let me know in the comments as well. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if this video has been helpful. It really does help my channel grow. Be sure to also subscribe to my Substack now, where I'm doing a lot more management techniques and tips. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out some of the other episodes while you're here.